I'm Eric Trommater. Thank you for listening to UK Cinema History. UK Cinema History, the history of Ealing Studios. Hey, I'm here by myself. So I'm just going to do a sing-along from an Ealing film. Sing as we go and let the world go by. Singing the song we march along the highway. Say goodbye to sorrow. There's always tomorrow to think of today. Sing as we go, although the skies are gray. Beggar of king, you've got to sing a gay tune. Oh, there's Daniel. Do, 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 do.
Give me a second. It's a little bit noisy here.
Take your time. Take your time. Yeah, so this is great. I've actually got people in here who I didn't drag. That's awesome. So last week we do have on replay a conversation I had with my friend Fiona Powell, whose mother was actually in Penny Paradise with Peter Sellers in 1951, and we discussed the origins of UK cinema through two of its inventors in 1888. The first being William Freeze Green, whose life is in the movie the oh crap, why can't I remember the movie? Robert Donnet played him, and it was anyway. I guess it doesn't matter. And the other was Louis Le Prince, who was in Leeds, and they had developed the first movie cameras and the first motion pictures. And Louis Le Prince is kind of an interesting story because he invented the technology in 1888 and then got on a train and completely disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to him in 1890. And to bring it kind of up to date, Thomas Edison in the United States was able to corner the patent on film because neither of these two could get the rights, and he was able to create a monopoly which wasn't broken up until 1915. So that's where we're at. So to begin with Ealing Studios, we're just going to do a little thumbnail history, and then some of the films that get discussed along the way. Feel free to interject if you've either seen the film or know anything about it. And I'm going to pause along the way, but this part's going to be short. So Ealing Studios is the oldest active studio in the world. And it was formed in 1902 when a guy named Will Barker bought the White Lodge at Ealing Green, which is right outside of London. And he had been a commercial traveler and had been just kind of an amateur photographer. And all he had was a hand cranked Lumiere camera, but he bought this lodge, and he built these large, very tall glass walls and glass ceilings so that all the light could get in, but the English weather could stay out. If anybody's seen the film Hugo, the Martin Scorsese film Hugo, you saw those kind of structures. But by 1912, they had become the largest studio in Britain. And if you're looking for real history, the very first one-reeler to look up is a film called The Child Stealers in 1904, which Barker he directed himself. and it's an interesting little silent film, but it's not, it's nothing historically important in terms of technology, but it's a interesting little film in terms of the influence that it had. A lady accidentally leaves her child in a pram outside of a shop, and the child is taken by a group of kidnappers. Then we follow the kidnappers back to their lair where they're taking children, selling their clothing, and then turning them into beggars. And it really is as simple as that. I'm tossing out mod designations just so that if my internet goes funky, um, uh, the room won't completely crash. But anyway, by 1909, States market, but he ran afoul of Edison and his monopoly, and Edison's monopoly didn't get broken up until 1915, which, bad luck for him, that's when the British film industry was shut down for World War II. And by 1929, he went bankrupt and he had to sell. And during the 1930s, the talkies period, Ealing Studios was run basically as a part of MGM Studios. But there they created a bunch of musicals, and Daniel heard me singing at the beginning one of the songs from it, which or from one of their more important ones. But this was the time period where the real talent came over from MGM. A guy by the name of Michael Balkin made about 60 films there. And the big name then was someone you may not have heard of called Gracie Fields, who was the highest paid actress in the world at that time. And she was a music hall performer. And Sing As We Go is the film I recommend from that period. But during the war, the studio was used more to make propaganda films. And then come 1949 came their most important period, and that was when they made a series, 1945, when they made a series of films that everyone would remember. And the first one that I really think of is called Dead of Night, which, by a show of hands, are you familiar with the motif of the ventriloquist dummy coming to life from Dead of Night, the famous Cavalvecchi? Yes. Okay. Daniel, well, we all knew you knew that one, and of course
I'm backing up.
The two people who taught film. Yes, that was one of them. Another section was directed by Charles Crichton, who you may not have heard of, but he was the director of several Ealing comedies, including The Lavender Hill Mob. But his very last film that he made at the age of 87, I think we've all seen, and that was a film called A Fish Called Wanda, which he co-wrote the screenplay for and directed. He co-wrote that with, of course, John Cleese of Monty Python fame. But when you look at the influence of Ealing Studios, Monty Python is a good example. There's a couple of documentaries out there where Terry Gilliam talks about the film The Lavender Hill Mob, which is about a couple of old guys working for the British government who are kind of stuck in rudimentary jobs, who, to get out of their jobs, are melting down gold and smuggling it out as statues of the Eiffel Tower, mini little souvenir statues. And Terry Gilliam talks about how the oppressiveness of moving from one office to the other, to the other, to the other, really influenced Brazil. But other people who were deeply influenced by Ealing Studio during that period, Martin Scorsese is a very big fan of a film called Passport to Plimico, which is another one I highly recommend. It has this great plot. So there's a treasure found in Plimico, which is where just outside of where Big Ben is in London. And when the government comes to take it, they find an old document saying that Plimico was declared to be actually part of the Dukedom of Burgundy. And so Plimico claims itself to be Burgundy so that they can keep the treasure. And it contains the great line when they're accused of being anti-British, said, "We are British down to our souls, and that is why we're fighting for our rights to be Burgundians." There's another great film called Whiskey Galore. You might also see it called Tight Little Island. That was its release in the name in the United States. But I highly recommend any of the films from the Ealing Studio catalog from 1945 is when Dead of Night came out, but I would recommend going to, say, the 1949 to about 1955, and you're going to see at least 10 films that are on the BFI's list of the 100 best movies of all time. So, and I'm just going to list off a few films. Kind Hearts and Coronets was one of many that they made with Alec Guinness, and this is one where Alec Guinness plays several parts. The plot is that a young disinherited family of a duke decides to kill anyone between him and the dukedom, and every one of them is played by Alec Guinness. So because of course they're all related, and it has a line in it that I quote all the time. I must admit he exhibits the most extraordinary capacity for middle age that I've ever encountered in a young man of 24. I mentioned the Lavender Hill Mob, but other ones that I think are equally classic with Alex Guinness was The Man in the White Suit, in which a man invents a suit that can never get dirty, but then it gets driven out of business by the cloth makers because, of course, if a suit can't get dirty, why would anyone ever replace it? The Cruel Sea, which is a 1953 movie where, and it's actually a drama. If you look on the BFI list, it's the top-rated British naval film of all time, even ahead of In Which We Serve, just as an example. And then their very last one with Alec Guinness, and their first one in color with The Lady Killers, which the Coen brothers remade with Tom Hanks in the early noughties, but that closed out that period because they at that time were bought out by the BBC, where they became more of a place to film for television. So anybody who's ever seen the Quartermass television show, that was filmed there. The non-video shots for the early Doctor Who was shot there. Smiley's People was shot there. Then they became a music video studio for a while. And welcome aboard, Herbert. Good to see you. So, but they finally did get bought out again in 1995, and by the mid-2000s, they actually decided to become a movie studio again and produce feature films. And the very first one of those was 2002's well, I'm sorry. The first one was 2001's Lucky Break, but the 2002, that version of The Importance of Being Earnest, which I think it's with Colin Firth. It's an excellent movie version of that Oscar Wilde play. You could do a lot worse than watch only that one as your only film version of an Oscar Wilde if you're a fan. But the Edgar Wright films. Shaun of the Dead was actually shot at Ealing Studios. Every one of those is shot. Every single shot on that is shot on a backlot to recreate London, just as an example. And then recent films include the in 2011 The Iron Lady, which won the last Oscar for what's her name? Somebody remind me. Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep. And The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch, whatever his name is. You know that guy. All right, Benedict Cumberbatch. I don't want to piss off the Cumberbatches. But and then last year's Last Night in Soho, the Edgar Wright film, which I thought was a great movie, but I'm in a minority because I know a lot of people who thought it was hot garbage, and but I absolutely loved it. So that's the history there of Ealing Studios. But I think this can be more about kind of broader themes in British film. And what we like about British film, what we don't like about British film, what are some of our preconceptions when watching a British film. And I'm going to turn to Daniel with that question first, because of course he did used to teach film, and because I respect his opinion a lot. So I'm going to mute myself. And Daniel, when you queue up a film from England, are there any kind of expectations that you have? Anything that, any prejudices that go into your mind? Is there anything maybe that it has to overcome in order to keep your attention?
Well, no, I don't know if I have any particularly negative prejudices. There might be some, but I do expect good dialogue, good writing in an English film. I think that the bar of quality is generally higher in at least classical English film. Okay, I do have one particular prejudice, and that's that recent films from Northern England I find myself allergic to, and that includes films like Trainspotting, anything by Andrea Arnold, or um, who are the others? Guy Ritchie. I just do not get along with those movies, and it might be something personal. I don't know what it is. I think there might be one or two exceptions, but uh, I've seen some films by Ben Wheatley, and some of them are kind of fascinating in their strangeness, but not really my kind of film either.
Have you seen any
Um,
Ken Loach films?
yeah. Okay, Ken Loach. Yeah, I also in his case, I would say that the my allergy to Northern British films is a fault of my own viewing. I did recently watch a Ken Loach film that I finally liked. I didn't. It's not the sort of film that I would have liked years ago, but I appreciate that he's that it's an honest film, and it has something to say. And what was it? It's the one that won his most recent Palme d'Or. What was it? It is a person's name. Daniel Blake. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he retired after that one. You're correct. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
Um,
I found that
Loach
I
is a
found that I respected.
Loach is a hard nut to crack. Now I love his films. Don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
I'm a flag waving socialist. Free Ireland, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, type of a person. I'm.
Yeah.
uh, and you do have to get over the fact that everything is going to have a point of view, and I do think you have to almost have to agree with him to enjoy his films. I honestly
Uh-huh.
do. I don't think you can go in to a Ken Loach film and not have his political prejudices and enjoy it all the way through, because you are not going to sympathize with the characters
Yeah.
because they are simply mouthpieces. Now he has made some films. The Danny Blake one's a good example where he subverted that. But yeah, yeah, he's a hard nut to crack. How about Mike Lee?
Yeah. Uh, I respect him too, but I also have not found one of his that I actually like. I think I was impressed by Naked when I first saw it. I saw it again a couple of years ago for our clubhouse group, and it fell a little bit in my estimation. But yeah, he has a certain method for working with actors, and he spends months and months sort of writing the film with his actors, which is, I suppose, it's one way to make a film that's not boilerplate, but it's also I don't know, I'm a little bit suspicious of the method. Uh,
I recommend you see a movie called Life is Sweet, which is not his best film, but his most approachable film. Um, and by watching that film, perhaps maybe you'll see, oh well, this does produce good results, and perhaps the next time a Michael Lee film comes around, you won't have in the back of your mind some of his, let's face it, because he doesn't have studio interference. Some of his films aren't going to be the most entertaining. But
mhm.
Life is Sweet is one I would recommend, just because of its approachability. I'm going to move on to Herbert. And Herbert, same question. Do you have any kind of preconceptions when you first go see a British film? Anything that you're expecting to see? Anything that it might actually have to overcome? Any kind of a negative association?
Um, I think I usually expect verbal humor, sort of like complex verbal interplay comedy, which you don't see in American films too much. And the first British films that I thought of as British films, I saw when I was in the military in Goose Bay, Labrador, about 1963. They were the Carry On series, I believe. At least that's what I think I saw them.
Great
But
movies.
yeah, so that's the only comments that come immediately to mind.
Unfortunately, they made 23 of those, and that was 20 too many as far as I was concerned.
Yeah,
Uh,
they were a little excessive.
but I have to say, the black and white ones are my favorites. Yeah,
That's the only ones I saw.
the Carry On Cleo is a perfect example of English filmmaking, because they filmed it on the abandoned sets for Cleopatra, the big epic with Elizabeth Taylor
Oh,
that had abandoned because Elizabeth Taylor's health wouldn't put up with the English weather, so they had abandoned these sets to go film in Italy. So the Carry On crew just moved in and filmed there. Carry On Up the Kybor is another one where they just reused the sets from Zulu. You know, yeah, I think those are excellent examples of very dry British humor. But then they got a little, I think, too dirty towards the end, especially like Carry On Emmanuel, um, where at a certain point they just became all tits and ass to me, and that was uh, but yeah, they beat it into the ground. They even had Carry On Christmas specials every year for years. I mean, they were basically the Simpsons of Britain for about 2 decades. But
of course, there's the Hammer films. They were from Britain, weren't they? vampire film,
Yeah,
stuff like that.
absolutely. And I want to do a Halloween special on Hammer Horror. Yeah, yes, absolutely. And of course, you think of all the big stars that we think of, like Christopher Lee came out of those films, and yeah. But yeah, a lot of people consider them the Roger Corman studios
Equivalent,
of
yeah.
Britain, but they really weren't, because these were high quality films. They really
Yeah.
were. They'll scare the bejeebus out of you, but they're great. And technically at a high level, these were members of the Royal Shakespeare Company were being hired to play these parts.
Oh,
No, yeah. But yeah, I would love to do a show just on Hammer Horror. Um, Obviously, we can't have people watch every single Hammer Horror film, but assign out two or
yeah.
three uh, as examples of the like Horror of Frankenstein or something like that.
Who was
That's a
that
great
fellow
idea.
that played Dr. Van Helsing, was it, or whatever? You come in at the end and stick a stake through that vampire and save the whole audience for the church.
His name is
Can't
escaping
remember the
me,
actor's
but
name.
he was the guy from the Star Wars movies who played the bridge commander. Crap,
Oh,
why why can't I remember his name? He also did Sherlock Holmes for them, for
right,
Hammer.
Sherlock Holmes. Right, that's what I think it was supposed to take place with.
Yeah, and his name's gonna come to me as soon as this room's over, I'm sure. But
Yeah, I have a lot of that. I just turned into an octogenarian a few weeks ago.
yeah, well, that's a good thing, though. It just means you've lived a
Yeah.
long time.
Yes, yes. The alternative is not to be an
It,
octogenarian, not to live so long.
absolutely, absolutely. Beat the casket any day.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to move on just so that we can get everybody in the room, and I also want to leave some time for Vern to speak. So, am I pronouncing your name correctly, Paola? Obviously not.
No, it's hi. It's actually Paola.
Nice to meet you,
Um,
Paola, and welcome to the room. Thank you for coming.
thank you for inviting me. I'm Italian actually, but I lived in the UK for many years, and I'm a movie buff, so I love to watch movies, and I've been quite interested in British movies for quite some time. I do not agree with Daniel, I think, that said that he wasn't keen on stuff like Train Spotting, which actually is one of my favorite movies of all time, I guess. I've read the book by Irvine Welsh, who's a Scottish writer. And that reminds me of something that my daughter wrote for a university paper, and she compared the history of Scotland portrayed by movies, and she compared Braveheart with Train Spotting. I mean, Braveheart, which is a typical Hollywood blockbuster, gives us an idea of Scotland, a brave country fighting for its independence, while you see the nihilism in the characters of Train Spotting when they perceive life as a pointless endeavor. And it's quite interesting because it actually portrays life in Scotland, especially that kind of life, junkies living in council houses, completely disenchanted with society, with government, and stuff like that, in a very interesting way. I mean, if you are familiar with life in Scotland and the way Scottish people think, you can really appreciate Train Spotting. And as far as Ken Loach is concerned, I think is an absolute genius. I mean, Ken Loach takes think Ken Loach has represented Scotland quite often, and one of my favorite movies is actually, unlike my name is what was the I can't I mean what was the name of the film that was I watched it and I can't remember the title now. There is another movie that I find
My name
incredible.
is Joe. It's one of my favorite films of all time.
That
Yes, yes. Where, but about the recovering alcoholic
Yes,
who
precisely. He's
causes an accidental death, and yes,
yes, and the
yeah.
last.
That one of my favorite, one of my favorite films of all. I have seen that film, and I don't repeat watch films. I've seen that
Well,
film 10
I
times,
don't know if
and I get
there,
something out of it every time.
there is another one from Ken Loach, and it's based in Glasgow, and it's called Angel's Share, and it's very different from My Name is Joe, because My Name is Joe is quite gloomy, just like Sorry We Missed You, which is one of his latest ones. Angel's Share
And
is
what I think one of his lesser films, sorry we missed you. I think is not. I don't consider that one of his great films.
no, it's probably not, but I like the subject. But Angel's Share, which I recommend for the panel here to watch, is a movie that tackles the problem of alcoholism and people that have been that are in prison, and they just
And abusive relationships.
communities are basically, it has a very positive vibe to it, and the moral of this story is very positive. It's about basically it's about whiskey. I'm not going to give away any of the stories because I really think it's worth watching, and it's based in Glasgow, which again is very similar. The ambience is very similar to Train Spotting, and people living on small petty crimes and riddled with money problem and things like that. But it has a very, very uplifting ending, so I would recommend you guys to watch it. Thank you.
Can I ask you your opinion? Hopefully you've seen it. Have you seen Small Faces?
Oh gosh, I think I have, but I can't remember.
It came out about the same time as Train Spotting, and it's similar in terms of it being but it's actually the heroes are in high school, and
I
a very small child accidentally shoots with a BB gun the head of a gang, and the gang is terrorizing a family in Glasgow. And it's an interesting, if you ever did a double feature with that and Train Spotting, you get the two sides of Scotland, the two major cities, and you see and you see them balance, because they're almost like two different worlds, but the same country. Well, the
yeah,
same.
we'll definitely check that out. But the comparison between a big blockbuster movie like, as I said, Train Spotting, which puts Scotland under a very different light from what it is the reality. And I would say that even who was the director, Danny Boyle, actually did a really good job on capturing the reality and the gloominess of life in Scotland. And it's got a very dark humor. I don't know if you're familiar with the British humor in general is pretty dark, but the Scottish one is the darkest you can possibly imagine. It's and I find it quite interesting, I would say.
And then another one, although it's not in Scotland, it's in Northern England from about that time, that Brassed Off. Have you seen that one?
No, I have not. But you remind me of another very popular movie director during at that time, late 90s, early 2000. Guy Ritchie, and I
A
think
very handsome fellow.
yeah, he's better best known as Madonna's husband. But Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrel is definitely a film I would suggest to watch if you. That's not Scotland. That's not gloomy, but it's it's a leaf of Quentin Tarantino's book, and in an English way, and I think it's quite entertaining.
I like The Gentleman. I know I'm kind of on an island on that one, but which was a more recent one he did with Matthew McConaughey, a lot as well. And he also does these big, Disney films like Aladdin and what was his King Arthur thing, and and things like that, which I watch them anyway, just because of the directorial brilliance, and those great flashes. But you can kind of tell his heart's not in those kind of films.
Yeah, possibly.
Just to clarify, Paula, I didn't say that Trainspotting was a bad movie or that Ken Loach was a bad director. I said that, that I have a personal allergy to that to their films, and I may yet get over that someday. I don't know. I've seen them only once, so I can't make an informed judgment about them.
No, it's okay. I mean, this is just my mere opinion, but
Sure.
because I lived in Scotland for so many years, and I'm very familiar with the with the society and the way Scottish people think. Actually, in Scotland they're very, very proud of train spotting, even though it's like I said, it's an extremely gloomy portrait of Scottish society. But I mean, in a way, it's, this story takes you back to what happened back in the 80s and Margaret Thatcher, the dismantling the industry. Glasgow and Edinburgh, to an extent, they suffered economically because of Thatcherism, and this is portrayed especially in Ken Loach. Ken Loach is a very critical director of that period back in the 80s, and is very political. It actually was kicked out of the Labour Party for for his extreme views, but
He was kicked out of the Green Party too.
Possibly. I mean, the latest Labour leadership, Keir Starmer, he's definitely trying to break down the extremism in Labour Party, and Ken Loach was one of the victims. But this is just a little detail that's got nothing to do with movies.
Well, we are going to do a Ken Loach episode someday, and even if it's just me in this room, because I have a passion for his films, and I have a similar passion for Mike Leigh's films, quite honestly. And they're more modern, they're in color, and they're now the problem with Ken Loach is you have to have subtitles on, even if you live in England, to understand his films, because he is very big on accents. Wouldn't you say, Bill? It's somebody who, I mean, he absorbs the local culture, and he is distilling it to you straight. And have you seen his first film, Kez?
I can imagine that for you, American, you need subtitles when you got the proper thick Glaswegian accent or the northern, the Newcastle accent and things like that. I can imagine that it's quite difficult.
A film I think of from the 60s, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, is a film I turned subtitles on for. Because of Albert Finney's thick Brummie accent in that. Made it hard to understand, but luckily we live in the age of closed captioning, so we can enjoy these films no matter where we are in the world.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. But I find that, I mean, as much as if you really want to capture the reality of any society in a movie, you need to reproduce the proper accent. This is also the reason why you cannot have an Italian not played by an Italian. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but Enrico Fermi, for example, in Oppenheimer, was by an American actor, which was very disappointing.
Don't even get me started on that film. We'll be here for hours.
No, I won't.
I found that whole film very disappointing. I'm sorry. I know it's a big hit, and I encourage more films to be made like it, but not that one.
Well, the latest Enzo Ferrari's movie, the biopic on Enzo Ferrari, again, was not played by an Italian, and this had a huge uproar across here in Italy because they thought, well, why not having an Italian actor playing, an Italian character?
Well, here in the States, we have a similar uproar of the Italian Americans over a animated film called Super Mario Brothers. So, um, you know, white people problems.
Yeah, this is well, it can be a discussion in itself, but I would like to listen more about the Healing Studios, which are in London, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it?
Yes, right outside of yes, just outside of London, right there, Ealing Glen. Yeah, and again, they are the oldest operating studio in the world. Now, I think when you say the phrase Ealing Studios to an English person, they're going to discuss those movies from 1949 to 1955. And to me, that's fair enough because those are not only their best movies, but uh, there's a BFI poll from 1999 of the 100 best films of all time, and 10 of them are on it, which means that Ealing Studios, in that time period, in that short period of time, produced 10% of what the BFI considered the greatest films of that century. And it's not just those great Alexander.
I'm sorry, Eric. I was just
If
caught up with some family stuff.
what did I bleep out?
No, 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 no. I'm sorry. I wasn't following the conversation because the door rang. So that's
Oh, okay. I was saying The Cruel Sea. I think is must watch British cinema from Ealing Studios in that period. I think as far as if you want to understand where the humor of a Goons or Monty Python came from, you need to watch films like Passport to Pimlico. The absurdist humor, uh, which is quite obviously inspired the members of Monty Python, that when John Cleese went to make his big film of Fish Called Wanda, he grabbed Charles Crichton as his director and co-wrote the screenplay with him from Ealing Studios from that period. And of course, that takes us back to the Lavender Hill Mob, which, besides having a great performance from Alec Guinness, is one of the most subtly funny movies I think ever made. So that to me, even if you just summed up the entirety of Ealing Studios by that period of film, you're still talking about great films.
Eric, when you listed all the Ealing films, the highlights of Ealing Studios from that era, there's you hit most of the high points, but there's one you missed out, the Titfield Thunderbolt. Do you know that one?
Oh yes, that's a great film, but I think that's hard to find,
Yeah,
isn't it? Maybe not
I've seen
anymore.
it. I saw it maybe 15, 20 years ago.
You know what? I'm going to have to look for it again. I haven't seen it since I was in college
Yeah,
in the 1980s. And
I forgot how I managed to see it.
yeah, you're right though. That was a big.
Yeah, but Dead of Night is one of my absolute favorites, and I'll be writing on that pretty soon, and I have to dust off my essay on that. But Dead of Night is there's a lot to say about that.
Well,
We could do a room
with
on
Halloween coming up, we could just have an episode dedicated to Dead of Night. That'll help you.
absolutely.
Yeah. You guys want to do an episode on Dead of Night next week? It's an easy film to find and a very, very fun one to watch. And it has four of Ealing's great directors. Well, three of Ealing's great directors and the greatest director ever to come out of the country of Brazil, all directed segments for that film.
You want to wait till October? I could be better prepared, and it'll be more topical.
Yeah, let's wait till October then. Yeah, I just didn't want you to have to wait, Daniel.
Oh, I
Because
got
I
plenty
want
to
to,
do.
because I want to read your essay.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's going to take me a little bit of time to prepare it, but
I was
You're,
I
I
think I
was
could have it ready.
reading just now of the movies that have been produced recently by the Healing Studios, and I didn't know that Notting Hill was made in the Ealing Studios. And that's such a great comedy. I loved it. Although Four Weddings and a Funeral was the forerunner, but Notting Hill is such a great movie, and I'm really happy that it was produced in the UK in the Healing Studios. So.
You know, I haven't seen Notting Hill since it was in the theaters, but I'm friends with a guy by the name of David Crowther who does the History of England podcast, one of the larger podcasts out there, and that's his favorite film. And we constantly make fun of him for it. But he defends it to the death. So I do have to rewatch it because that's the second person who I've got respect for who've told me that it's a great film.
Well, it's got one of the best quotes of all time.
I'm just
This
a
is the whole,
woman
yeah, I'm just a
asking you
girl.
to stay.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is a great quotable line, which is another thing that Ealing Studios is known for, is the great quotable lines. You know, I mentioned a couple, but the one I always quote from Lavender Hill Mob is when he said, when Alec Guinness's character says he wants enough to become to support the life he wants to become accustomed, you know, which I always thought was a great line, and very quintessentially British.
And I suppose the Ealing Studios would be basically the counterpart of Cinecittà in Rome. I mean, this historical studios where all the biggest blockbusters back in the 50s and 60s were produced.
The difference, though, Ealing Studios was smart enough not to build an airport next to it, so they could record live sound. Whereas, unfortunately, Roma did not do that, and so that's why all Italian films have to be dubbed.
Well, so I suppose, but I don't know whether the airport was already there, to be honest, and they built the studios
Yeah, I
regardless.
think you're right. You've got I've got it backwards. You're correct because it was a silent period and no one. What do we care? About noise because films are silent.
That's right, and that's a military. Now it's a commercial airport, but it used to be a military airport. So that was used back in the 40s and so on. But yeah, I mean, it takes you back to a period where movies were the only form of entertainment that people used to have, and the golden era.
So next week, I'm going to take my friend Fiona's suggestion, and we're going to do something popular just to kind of get people interested. You can't just feed them cabbage. We're going to do compare and contrast between the Pink Floyd The Wall and Tommy by the Who. And Pink Floyd The Wall was directed by Alan Parker, who I think is one of the most underrated British directors in the world. And Tommy by the Who was directed by Ken Russell, who, if you don't have an opinion on Ken Russell, you will. I'm not saying it'll be a positive one, but he was.
With Ken Russell, you're right. I mean, sometimes he managed to pull out some incredible movies, and some other times they just leave you, nah, a bit like that. But Tommy, Tommy reminds me of my very, very young age when I approach music, and to me, it's great. It's absolutely wonderful. I love it. I know I'm biased. I love Tommy.
I'm going to go on record as saying I love both
Yeah,
movies,
fine.
but what we're going to talk about next week is I think they intermingle very, very well in terms of both their plot and in terms of this art form, the rarely used art form called the rock opera. But also, it's interesting to compare and contrast Alan Parker's directorial style, which is very, very slick to Ken Russell's much rougher style and much more over the top, because Alan Parker began life as an assistant to Ken Russell on The Devils and was a disciple of his. So it's going to make for a very interesting conversation from that point of view. Plus, they're movies everybody's heard of.
Yeah, I mean, I miss that period because rock operas and musicals. I mean, this is my kind of stuff, and you don't see them anymore. Apart from, I think the last one I've seen that was kind of a sort of musical was La La Land. I think that was the last one I've seen. Apart
The
from,
mo yeah, La La Land is boy, that's another one of those like Oppenheimer where everybody loved that movie
Oscar.
but me.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
for best director though, it lost to the better film Moonlighting for best film. So yeah, there's Yazzie. Okay, Yazzie, I know you got here late, but I'm not
Hey,
gonna go. I'm not gonna go without your interjection. We're not going to review the entire history of Ealing Studios because I'm sure you already know it.
sorry. I was like, first I had problem finding the room, and then I got here like I just have like one little thing to say about Alec Guinness and his comedies. I'm pretty sure you went over it all. Just that the way he looks in all those movies, I think that's the definition of the chameleon actor. Like he could do anything. And then when you look back and look at him in all those movies, you can find someone that looks like him right now. Like for instance, you watch Man in White Suit, which I really love that movie, and especially like at the end when like Joan Green would look at Rita Hope when the dress is all like spoiler alert, that like they tear up the dress, that look that they give each other. And doesn't Alec Guinness look exactly like Stephen Fry on that film? To me, it's like Stephen Fry like tried to imitate his whole career from Alec Guinness in that movie. And like another one, what was that? What was the other one that I wanted to talk about? uh and that like Alec Guinness, I just wanted to say he looked like uh Steve Coogan, how he tries all the time to be Alec Guinness in all those Ealing comedies. uh, that's it. I just wanted to say that how much I loved him. And I think is it, can we like somehow compare, that was my question, can we compare Michael Balkan with Robert Evans somehow, as uh
Well,
like
he did less cocaine
true,
than
that's
Robert
true
Evans.
actually. No, but
Um, yeah, I can see that. I can see that because they both directed their own movies. Um, yeah, and he really did change that studio from being really kind of a dumping ground for upbeat depression films to be doing serious dramas and this very sophisticated form of humor, the same way that Paramount was changed from a studio that was basically doing race car knockoffs to doing more serious films like the Godfather and if we're going to make this comparison, then would you say It Only Rains on Sunday would be kind of Ealing Studios' equivalent to Paramount's Love Story in terms of big financial hit weepies that, in one case it was Balkan and in the other case it was Evan, fought like heck to make and made the studio?
yeah, somehow like how the way exactly as you just explained, like I see them as like the trailblazers, and like they brought the name of the producer and the studio to like I know that back then it was not like now, the studios were sometimes more important than the actors and the filmmakers, and how uh and the way the filmmaking worked. But how, like, to bring the movies in different eras and different genres to the people, and have like such remarkable marks in movie history. I mean, by their names, like people know their names, the name of these producers. And I think that's so strange, because today people don't know the name of the producer. They just know the name of the studio. But these people, they have like they have their, and with such different vast genre of movies, and they have their signature on them. That's what I found very fascinating about these kind of producers. And I think this is what we miss right now. Like, right now, they're like people like actors and writers, they're struggling to get like the money with their producers. Like back then, the producers had such a vision for filmmaking. And like, okay, we can say like Robert Evans was like more like popular, like, but Michael Balcon, he was Sir Michael Balcon. He made mm, th- like the things that he did to British cinema, like just Paola just said, like the studio is still working today and have made like such
Hey,
cult movies,
Yasi,
you know.
can I interrupt for just a second? Because
Of
it
course.
occurs to me that without historical context, um, some of the people in the room might miss out on who Michael Balcon really was. And then he was a producer at MGM Films who was able to split off Ealing Studios by themselves. And his first hires for the studio are some names you probably haven't heard of but should have. But the most important one, I think, was Gracie Field, who, as I pointed out before, was the highest paid actor in the world at the time she was making her films. She was a music hall performer. But other names, Stanley Holloway, George Formby, and Will Hay. And if you see these names in any film, you know it's going to be an entertaining movie. And this was the troupe that Balcon put together. And these actually films, before the ones that kind of Ealing Studios is known for, although Balcon was the person who put those together, but these are the ones that really influenced your Monty Pythons, your Goons, your Carry On, etc. But for example, one of the best known films of that time was called Sing As We Go. And this kind of will give you an indication of what Balcon brought to film. It was a musical about the closing in 1934 of the local mill and the unemployment that took place. It was the very first film that Ealing shot on location. And it follows Gracie Field, who is a wonderful singer, and who breaks out into song all throughout as on her adventures as she's looking for work in Blackpool, waiting for the mill to reopen. And at the end of the film, the mill reopens, and she leads the entire town in song as they go back to work. And you may recognize the tune if you're a fan of Monty Python, but the words were, "Sing as we go and let the world go by. Singing a song, we march along the highway. Say goodbye to sorrow. There's always tomorrow to think of today. Sing as we go, although the skies are gray. Beggar or king, you've got to sing a gay tune." Does anybody recognize that tune?
Yet you said it's from Monty Python.
Well, yeah, the new lyrics by Graham Chapman were sit on my face and tell me that you love me. I'll sit on your face and tell you I love you too. I love to hear you moralize when I'm between your thoughts. But anyway, but that's how big an influence Balkan had on Britain, because I can't think of British humor without thinking of Monty Python, and I can't think of Monty Python without thinking of Balkan. So now that I've
And
set that,
also those like
now I
sorry,
no,
go ahead.
Yasi, I was turning back over to you. Now that I've set into historical, precedents, the importance of Balkan, I'll turn it back to you. But yeah, so we're not talking about him in a vacuum.
Oh, sorry. And then also I wanted to say like those Dirk Bogarts movies. And there was a great documentary I watched like many years ago. I can't remember exactly what the name was. Sorry, I had to like look it up, but it was about
Forever
the
Ealing, Forever Ealing. It is a great documentary. Forever
yeah, like
Ealing.
Doctor in the House, Doctor at Sea, and how Dirk Bogart talks about like his like how entertaining these movies were, and the people like got married in the theaters while watching those movies. It's like that was the amount of emotion and excitement the movies create. These comedies, like the comedies today, are so kind of like shallow and banal, but the comedies back then, they were like so it has a weight to them, and we still feel that weight of that comedy. And I really that's what I wanted to say about like a great producer who started these studios. And mm, that like I really like personally I really appreciate all these the jobs that they did for comedy. That's so and the entertainment, because right now like the all the new movies, they lost the meaning of the entertainment in it. But these comedies, you watch them, enjoy them, uh, they had like depth in them. Even those like even the movies like Doctor in the House and Doctor at the Sea, they had like Bridget Bardot in them, and they were beautiful. They're beautiful to watch and enjoy. And like they give you like such great feeling afterward. You don't feel like you watch a comedy for escapism or like just to waste time. It gives you something. That's what I wanted to say. The importance of Ealing Studio is this. Like if we want, like when you go over to study the history of studios, that's why. That's the importance of them and the good producers.
Well, and the influence on British cinema afterwards too. I mean, and American cinema, for that matter, and world cinema. I mean, uh, if you the documentary that you were talking about, which I haven't seen in years either, but I mean, if you look at the people who were in there, John Landis, for who directed the Blues
Exactly. Yes,
Brothers,
yes, that's it. That's it.
Martin Scorsese, Terry Gilliam, for obvious reasons. I mean, Brazil is basically an Ealing film, right? Am I right?
Yes, yes, it is. It is.
And Tom Stoppard, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, you could totally picture Balkan making that film. With Stan Holloway, replacing Gary Oldman, and that whole genre exists today, but he created it. Because nothing like that existed before. Quite honestly, because something was and the use of language in an Ealing film, you can tell 5 minutes into an Ealing film that you're watching an Ealing film because of the use of language. There's just something different about it. Now, but this was something that Balkan came up with. They all spoke in the same accent, which is not noticeable if you're an American, but British people notice this quite a lot because, of course, they're more familiar with these actors in other roles for other studios. Well, they don't talk like that. But why is everybody talking like they're from, they're in a Katharine Hepburn film? that was Balkan's genius, because he was able to export this type of film around the world by flattening out the accents and giving it a single kind of a transatlantic sound. So whereas we were talking about the Ken Loach, the trouble a lot of people have watching a movie like Kes is the accents are so thick that even people in England can't understand it. Any of these Ealing films from especially 1949 to 1955, you can understand every single person in it, and that was his innovation. Which now
And they don't get
you may
old. The movies don't get old. They don't, and if they do, they age really well. They resonate to viewers today. That's what that's brilliant. That's the genius of a producer like Balkan.
you mentioned The Man in the White Suit. You could make that film today and and it would have exactly the same plot, character for character. My scene I think of that stands up today, that could be in a film today and still be genius, and be when oh God, what's her name? Joan, the female lead.
Oh, John Greenwood.
Yeah, when her father tells her to try and seduce Alec Guinness, and that seduction scene, she's supposed to seduce him to get him to give up the project, and then she turns because he's too shy, and she says, "Oh, thank God! If you had fallen for this, I would have killed you."
Yeah.
Now what are we gonna do to stop my father? And the whole film turns on a dime at that moment, in that quick scene. And wow, how genius is that? Because all of a sudden she's gone from being the villain to actually being his co-collaborator, and the rest of the film continues. And you mentioned the scene where the dress falls apart, and that look on her face. Um, that's not something that ages. That kind of a performance, that kind of a visual performance. So yes, yeah, very, very modern feeling. And as long as mills close, as long as there's unemployment, as long as you have people being selfish or overly patriotic or silly, the themes of them are always going to stay current. Well, does anybody else have anything?
No, as far as the accent is concerned, you're right. The movies produced in the 50s, they had that peculiar kind of accent, because if you compare it to United States as well, the accent used was a very neutral one. But nowadays, even in the UK, in BBC, they try to encourage regional accents, which makes the conversation, well, makes it
And
really,
which I agree with. I absolutely agree with, because of the cultural appropriation
yes.
issue. Yeah, I absolutely agree with. But we have to understand things in their time. Wouldn't you agree?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. But I noticed that also in Italian movies. I mean, we used to have, uh, the various Sofia Loren and Gina Lollobrigida, who tried desperately to mask their own regional accents. Gina Lollobrigida was. She was born just outside Rome, so she had kind of a Roman accent, and Sophia Loren, a pretty strong Neapolitan accent. But that was not acceptable in the golden era of movies. Nowadays, even new and contemporary actors, they tend to have this strong inflection, which I personally, probably because I'm an old fashioned kind of person, I don't really appreciate unless it's required by the script. But I find it, I don't know, to my ears a bit strange. I don't know why, but to me,
I was watching Pasolini's the Christ movie that he made with somebody from Italy, and they turned to me and said said that they were using the subtitles too because they couldn't understand
I mean,
anyone, you know,
it's
because of the regional
yeah,
accents.
it's pretty common, and I'm talking about series on television like Netflix series, very popular across here. Sometimes there is a very famous one across here in Italy called Gomorra, and that has characters from Naples talking about the Camorra and stuff like that. And I personally don't understand them because I am not familiar with that dialect. But it's happening the same in the UK. I mean, I was just reading just now the Shaun of the Dead, another one of my favorite movies. It was shot
Also,
in.
Ealing Studios.
Yes, exactly. But the characters they have, if I'm not mistaken, they have a London accent, and and so it's a little bit unusual. It's unusual for somebody who's used to a proper received pronunciation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying that it's a net positive in terms of getting the best performance out of someone. That Guinness adapted that. But I think it is one of the reasons why the films kind of stayed so timeless is because
I
they
mean,
are easier on the ear, I think,
yeah, that's
than
true.
most of the British films from that era.
But you cannot imagine, if we were to translate that into the American movies, you wouldn't imagine, a Quentin Tarantino's movie spoken with a proper English, I mean, American golden screen kind of accent. It wouldn't work, isn't it? And
Yeah,
Jamie,
It, that's
it wouldn't
exactly
be.
what.
Samuel Jackson wouldn't sound real,
Yeah,
would he?
if you can imagine a Catherine Hepburn delivering the path of the righteous man speech.
Yeah.
The path of the righteous man is set on the side by the conspiracy of evil men, and that's what it would sound like.
No, but the genius of that work was that it were according to the script, and as Eric mentioned, to the era that these movies were made. Like it's not gonna work today based on the script that the actors are playing to. They're not playing, but like back then, the script was written like that they had to change their accent and play to that kind of speech and pronunciations, and that these are different, and I think that also plays to the genius of the actors and how they tried to actually act. This is acting when you can act like Saoirse Ronan today. Like, see, she can speak English in Aussie accent to to southern USA. All this big range of accents she can cover, and
or
that's pure power.
Benabetch Kumquat, plays all those American. Actually, almost every British actor is now playing Americans.
Yeah, it wasn't like they
I
forced
noticed.
they forced like an Italian in an who plays an Italian. That was the difference in Ealing Studios. That none of these movies, if you watch them today, look racist to you. No, they don't. They don't, because the act the roles, the characters are written for like someone who speaks like that. It's not like an Italian is forced to drop the accent to play that role. No, an Italian
Well,
is
you're not going to
playing
find any
a
people
British
of color in the
actor,
films, though. You
a
aren't going to
British
find any
Roman.
people of color in the films,
Oh
though.
yeah, that's
You
true.
know, not racist means they hired people from Leeds, not that they hired people of color.
Agree.
If you were a Yorkshireman, you were fine, but.
That's true,
Please,
actually.
please do not allow Keanu Reeves to play any English characters because he mangled the English accent so badly. it was almost painful to listen
Oh,
to.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yes, yes, yes. But I would also kind of go with yeah, Shakespeare in Love suffers from that as well with Ben
Yeah,
Affleck.
it
You know,
works.
his accent.
It works quite well the other way around. I mean, British actors can play American with a fairly accurate accent, but for the Americans, unless you're Meryl Streep, it's quite kind of difficult to reproduce the proper British accent. I think that's in my opinion, anyway.
I saw a video a few days back. No, like during COVID, that Meryl Streep was reading James and the Giant Peach, and she was playing all those accents. That was brilliant. I said, like, is there anything this woman can't do? Is there anything? Like she's like right now she's in Steve Martin and Martin Short's TV series, Only Murders in the Building, and
Great
she's
show.
sick.
I highly recommend that. I
Great show.
highly recommend that show. Laugh out loud, funny.
Really, you see, this is like kind of classic comedy that you see again. This kind of, it feels like a Ealing studio. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, like, look at it. Look at the characters that they write. This is like a classic comedy, like lady killer kind of comedy. The,
But
and that's
I would
so
reverse
brilliant.
the accent thing. Damian Lewis is on a show here in the United States called Billions, where he plays somebody from New Jersey, and it is the worst American accent I have ever heard
That's
in my
fine.
entire life. And he is a brilliant actor. And the funny thing is, have we all seen Band of Brothers, the TV show Band of Brothers?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I have.
His accent on that show is brilliant. Great. I didn't even know Damian Lewis was English until I saw him in Shakespeare. You know, quite
Yeah,
honestly. You know,
he's good. And today I was watching a movie called The Clone Tyrone, and with who's that? Jamie Foxx, yes. And the protagonist, the guy that plays the main character, he's an I can't remember his name actually. He's an English actor. He's from London, but he actually plays the American. He's a black guy, and he plays the American incredibly well. I mean, he has a spot on accent.
Damian Lewis' accent was brilliant in Homeland, the TV
I
series, the
haven't seen that show.
Showtime series.
I really should.
Oh, you have.
Everybody tells me I should watch that show, and it's totally my type of show, and that's why I've avoided it because
He is
it's been set up too much for me.
stunning. Damian Lewis is stunning on that show.
But
I think he's even better than Claire Danes.
yeah,
He is he overshadows the first actress on the series with the accents. He speaks different languages, and he's really good in all of those.
but now Hugh Laurie's Baltimore accent to me always sounded like one of my British friends trying to fake what an American sounds like on the television show House. It's
Love.
kind of like this, you know, talking out of the side of your mouth so you don't actually have to enunciate any words. That kind of a thing, and using the pauses to kind of accentuate. Yeah, to me, I never once. But the funny thing is, there are people who I know in life who have no idea that Hugh Laurie is British or know about a bit of Fry and Laurie or any of the other things that he did before he was in House. So go figure.
I am one of them. I didn't know about that. I didn't know, like, later after I was watching House and I was in love with Hugh Laurie and the way he embraced that character. Literally becomes one with House. He is Holmes and Watson at the same time, and genius the way he acts. and I didn't know. So then I look back and I say, what is this? A little bit of Fry and Laurie. And I couldn't believe that he's British.
Not only
He's so good.
he
And
graduated,
that show is so good.
yeah, but I think he actually graduated at Oxford or Cambridge, one of the two.
Cambridge, you're
So I
right.
mean, when I moved to UK, it was the time when Fry and Laurie was a very popular show, and I couldn't believe actually that Hugh Laurie could actually pull off such a perfect American character. It was really impressive.
My first Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry run in was on the show The Young Ones, which where he played Lord Snot,
Yes, right.
and
You
the
guys,
character Neil has to pee, and he pees in a jar, and the jar of pee ends up on Lord Snot's head. And no, sorry, I think it's actually Stephen Fry who and he just looks up, and it's the most British thing ever. He just looks up and goes, "Ooh, that was wrong."
Young Ones was such an important show. I mean, it was completely stupid and anarchist, but it had so many talents in that show that it was unbelievable. I mean, what was his name? The guy that was married to one of the main actors. Oh gosh, I mean, I have to go and check the names
But
because I can't.
Rick Mayhill,
It,
yeah,
Is
yes,
Young
Fry,
Ones on Netflix now? Where can I watch Young Ones right now?
YouTube,
Do you know? Is it on Netflix?
YouTube.
Oh, YouTube? Oh,
Yeah,
good, good.
they're
Thank you.
free on YouTube. Yeah, they only had the 2 seasons, or the two whatever. I
didn't
keep
last
forgetting what
a
the
long
British word.
time. It was actually pretty short lived, but it was so important because it had so many talents. And to me, you were mentioning Monty Python. That kind of comedy was. Reminded me a little bit of the Monty Python, although Monty Python were completely, uh, they were more political. They were
They were
uh,
better educated than
yes.
the young ones.
No, don't,
The
no,
young
no,
ones was a reaction against the kind of if you asked Rick Mayhill what he thought of, well, he's dead now, but if you asked him what he thought of Monty Python, he was like, oh, a bunch of posh, Cambridge grads. They don't know what's funny.
They
They were a reaction to Python in a way.
yes, it
The
was
poshness of it.
back in the 80s, and again, I mean, the characters that they were presenting, there was Adrian, what's his name? I can't remember. He was the punk guy, and Rick Mail was,
The people's
they were,
poet.
yeah, they
Rick,
were
I'm
representing characters that you could actually find in the English society at that time, young people in England at that time, and obviously you couldn't recognize Monty Python in back in the 80s. They were very much crystallized in that kind of comedy of the 70s. Although I think one of the most fantastic film I've ever seen is Life of Brian, and I still watch it every time I have the possibility and the chance. I still watch Life of Brian, and I laugh my heart out because it's a masterpiece.
blessed are the cheesemakers.
You should have a room only about Monty
Well,
Pythons. Like we just go over all of them.
eventually. But I mean, but the problem with Monty Python is that it can't be everything that you talk about when it comes to British comedy. You know, and it is, to some people. If I have a room on Monty Python, I want to have a room on the Goons first. Because they came first, and you would never have a Monty Python without the Goons. I want to do Herbert, the Carry On films, because how could you have a Monty Python without the absurdist humor of the Carry On films? And and a room like this where we're talking about Ealing Studios, because how could you have Monty Python without Ealing Studios? Now, I'm not saying they don't deserve to be the center, but if all you talk about is Monty Python, which is very easy to do, then I think you're missing out on a lot of British humor, because Python isn't necessarily all of British humor. For instance, it's not all absurdism.
But you can say, me being an Italian, I mean, if I think about always look at the bright side of life, I mean, I can't help it, but I will laugh until tears come out of my eyes, because it's so how can I say, it doesn't have a nationality, it's so everybody can relate to that, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and isn't it awfully nice to have a penis? Isn't it frightfully good to have a dong? It's swell to own a stiffy, it's divine to own a dick. From the tiniest little tadger to the world's biggest prick. So 3 cheers for your Willie old John Thomas. Hooray for your one-eyed trouser snake. Your piece of pork, your wife's best friend, your pussy or your cock. You can wrap it up in ribbons, you can put it in your sock, but don't take it out in public or they'll put you in the docks and you won't come back. Ooh, thank you very much. Now, the funny thing is that scene went over very well in America, where I don't think most of the people who were laughing at it knew who the hell Noel Coward was, or what how Eric Idle was parodying him in terms of dress and in terms of the songwriting. But the humor was so transformative that you didn't have to have that background information for it to be funny.
See, that's why you must have a room about them, only concentrating on Monty Python, and tell us all about it.
Well, after we've had one on the Goons.
Okay, after one on the Goons, and what a
because
great pair you're doing next week.
Because I promised Fiona, whose mother was actually in a film with 3 of the Goons. I promised Fiona that I would do a Goons film, number 1, and number 2. I'm friends with a podcaster by the name of Royfield Brown, who would kill me if I did Monty Python before them.
Why would he kill you?
He hates Monty Python for the same reason that the young ones did. Bunch of but he's a Brummie. He's a Brummie. He's from Birmingham, and he is of color. His parents had moved to Birmingham from Jamaica.
I know him very well, but he
did How Jamaica Ruled the World, and and if I were to do a room on Monty Python in solo, he would come, which might make it worth it, but he would troll the entire time, and he's a lot smarter than I am. There's no way I would be able to out-argue him.
I can ping him. I can send him a message. I'll call him.
Impossible.
I can ping him too. I'm one of his Patreons for one of his podcasts. So,
so what a great pairing you're doing next week.
Yes, Pink Floyd The Wall versus Tommy. And I'm going to ask everyone to pick a favorite. I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, and fair enough if somebody says, I like them in different ways or what have you, but try and pick a favorite, because to me, they're 2 different kinds of films.
No, Tommy for me, because it's my childhood, and that really shaped the way I think and the way I am. It's such an important film for me.
Save that for next week. We don't want to we don't want to squeeze everything out. But yes, Tommy versus Pink Floyd The Wall. And the great thing about it is hardly anybody's going to have to do research, because I think everyone's seen that film, both films, at least once. And in my case, back when I were but a wee lad in college, and I thought that beer was food, Pink Floyd The Wall was like a daily occurrence in my dorm room. But I don't know, because maybe Tommy will be more popular. But I'd like to take a poll and see, because it also kind of the Pink Floyd versus the Who, two different, the progressive versus the kind of post mod rock. Uh, it'll be an interesting rundown to kind of get a poll of what's more who still owns the rock opera to this day. I mean, I know it's actually Andrew Lloyd Webber, but I don't like Andrew Lloyd Webber, so we're not going to do him. That's the benefit of this being my room.
Yeah, that would be a great talk. Next week is great. That's a great conversation for next week.
Well, you can thank my friend Fiona Powell, who said, "Well, Eric, you can't just feed them cabbage. You've eventually got to give them some corned beef. So that this is your corned beef." Pink Floyd The Wall versus Tommy. Ken Russell is, to me, the most irritating director in the entire world, but I think he was perfect for Tommy. So it's going to be an interesting conversation because the same year with Roger Daltrey, and I'm not spoiling anything for next week, in the lead role, he also made a film called Lithomania, which will never be discussed on this show. That was the one.
You were there when we were talking about Peter Greenaway, right? The cook, the thief. Because when the room over, when the room was finished, my biggest regret was why I haven't mentioned Ken Russell as a comparison to Peter Greenaway. As like I want to say why I didn't bring up his name, because he had to be there when you talk about Peter Greenaway, because he influenced the Peter Greenaway he inspired get lots of his inspirations from Ken Russell, and that's a great like psychedelic kind of movie, Tommy. That's for next week. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna keep
as a matter of fact, make some notes on Greenaway versus because that's a great comparison point. Plus, it's a film that we've all recently seen because we did it in the other room. In terms of the cook, the thief, the wife, and the lover, use of music.
Just a
Use of
question,
music.
but Peter Greenaway is also the one that directed In the Belly of an Architect, of the Architect.
Which, yes, that's actually one of my favorite of his films. Murder by Numbers and Belly of an Architect. Yep, both are his.
It was shot in Rome. I remember that movie, and I thought it was one of the weirdest.
So beautiful.
Movie I've
absolutely gorgeous. Every scene looks like a Renaissance painting. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely. The acting in that film is subpar, but you get over it, because when it's that beautiful to look at, you just stop caring. But yeah, absolutely.
It's easy. I mean, if you shot it was shot, I think, in Villa Adriana, which is a spectacular location for any movie, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, the scenery, the scenography is amazing, I must admit.
But yeah, next week we're gonna turn to the enfant sauvage of the British film, Ken Russell, and yeah, and if you haven't seen Tommy recently, don't worry about it, because it hasn't changed any.
Okay, get your corned beefs ready and your enfant sauvage chained for next week, or unchained. Actually, get your enfant sauvage unchained for next week. Tommy and the Wall
versus Pink Floyd The Wall, which but sneak preview when we talk about this. There is a documentary on Ken Russell where Alan Parker is interviewed on his time working with Ken Russell on YouTube, and I can't remember the name of it, but if you type Ken Russell documentary into YouTube, you will find that documentary. So if anybody wants to do that homework, that's great. And if not, well, then that'll be one less thing for us to talk about, but I'm sure we'll find plenty. We filled this room, didn't we?
That's a great suggestion for Alan Parker on Ken Russell. That's a gem to watch, I guess.
Well, and here's something that we won't talk about next week, but Ken Russell actually was still making films in his garage up until the day he died. That films that nobody saw. And if you see his last film, it is tasteless, it is tacky, it is awful. It's about Nazi Germany, and it is a skit comedy with some of just gross out humor about human skin, lampshades, and all sorts of awful things. And and Alan Parker was asked about it, and he said, yeah, he just couldn't stop saying action and cut, and so he just made all this garbage. But yeah, he was making these films for a couple of $100s in his garage, and I don't he wasn't deluding himself or anything. He didn't think that they were going to be released on the BBC or anything. He was just making them because some people, once they become a filmmaker, it gets in their blood. They can't stop. So
I've seen interviews with Scorsese about Ken Russell, and he mentions all these things, like how he made movies till his last breath. And Scorsese says like how he likes to be like him, like to make movies. And he says, I want to die at the scene
I
when
blanked
I
out
say
there. Can you
action,
repeat that?
and then
Yeah, Yazi, I lost internet.
oh, sorry. I said I watched interviews with Martin Scorsese about Ken Russell, and he says the exact same thing. He says that
Gosh darn it.
how Ken Russell. Oh,
Can anyone hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. Maybe it's my fault. Can you hear me?
I remember watching a movie back in the early 90s from Ken Russell, a really weird one called Whore with Teresa Russell. Has anyone seen it? Can you hear me, or am I in a dark spot?
Sing as we go, let the world go by. Singing this song, we march along the highway. Say goodbye to sorrow. There's always tomorrow to pick up the day. Sing as we go, although the skies are gray. Beggar or king, you've got to sing the gay tune. A song meant to smile, making life worthwhile. So sing as we go along.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.